So we've got a bit of a roundtable Q&A today. Let's jump straight in. Go for
And
it.
it's good. I think if I go on TRT, will I need to be on it for the rest of my life? How to maintain muscle when using a GLP-1? What adjustments would you make to your training when experiencing age-related joint breakdown? How important are rest periods? How would you approach sustainable fat loss?
I'm Ryan Stevens.
Dr. Taylor Waters.
I'm Ben Oliver.
Welcome to the Supra Human show, yeah?
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Supra Human show with your hosts, Ben Oliver, Ryan Stevens, Dr. Taylor Waters, and special guest, the Houston Texan, Jose Espinoza.
Yeehaw. Yeehaw. I'm surprised I should have shown up with boots and a cowboy.
Yeah,
Just
that's Nashville, October.
Yeah, when I was looking at him yesterday with the whiskey and the cigar, that was a real,
Just
a real
That's the way I
Texan.
popped out of the womb.
Yeah.
It's
Like proper badass, isn't
Yeah,
it? You know?
not like me. I was lost. I was holding the whiskey with two hands,
and a sippy cup.
lighting the wrong end of the cigar.
So we've got a bit of a roundtable Q&A today. So Taylor, you've accumulated some questions.
We got 5 questions to run
for
through,
the team. So let's jump straight in. Go for
and
it.
it's good. I think it's good to discuss because we might even have differing. I think the general themes will be similar between.
But we have
us.
our nuances.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why, again, having a coaching team of like 45 people, probably going to be going on 50 people. It's like, your people are going to have slight differences in the way they interpret things or the way they run things, but it'd be good to get everyone's sort of feedback on it. So the first question is how to maintain muscle when using a GLP-1. So you're looking at like a semaglutide, like a tirzepatide, something along those lines.
I think the only thing that I've found with clients using them is normally because of the appetite suppression, their protein intake has come down. And just again from like they're just more averse to eating a bunch of meat, and so like leaning on protein shakes and things are okay. From a resistance training standpoint, the only thing I would kind of look at is because their calorie intake is going probably quite low, I might pull back on volume to an extent. But in terms of like the actual training, the principles I think are pretty much the same.
Well, I guess the main thing would be train in the first place. Like, because some people, the issue you're going to get with
I must have. I was assuming like you've just added this to someone's kind of program, but
no.
okay.
So because obviously some people when they start like a fat loss process, bringing in the GLP-1 is sometimes one of the first things they do. Like say they just go to a doctor and they say, look, I've been trying to lose weight all this time. I struggle with this. Doctor, boom, GLP-1. The issue that you're going to run in is all that's doing is reducing the appetite so that you consume less, sometimes quite a lot less. But then quite often, unless you've been programmed to eat a higher amount of protein, you end up with a insufficient protein intake. And then if you're not training alongside that, then again, you're just net weight loss. All it is it's weight loss. You're not specifically losing fat. You're going to pull away from both fat and muscle tissue. So basically what we're looking at here is how are you going to avoid that risk of muscle loss when you brought in a GLP-1?
Yeah. Well, the main thing there is going to be making sure you include resistance training, isn't it? So, like, if you look at the factors that maximize muscle retention, is going to be protein intake, not as much of a huge calorie deficit. Obviously, the bigger the calorie deficit, the more chance there is to lose muscle mass as well as body fat, and making sure their training and their protein intake, they're going to be the main ones. But again, you're going to face different challenges, right? So like you said, if someone's on a GLP-1, they're going to be eating much less calories probably than someone that's not on it.
The only other thing I would do with the protein is because they're likely going to be eating less than I would say ideal. So if you're like a 250 pound guy, maybe we want you at around 170, 180 grams of protein, and you're just not hungry for that. I'm going to look at like what's the bare minimum that I want to see someone eat, and I'm going to try and spread it in smaller amounts through the day because they just can't eat 60, 70 grams of protein in one sitting, but they could probably do 20, 30 grams, 4 or 5 times a day in kind of smaller portions. So even if we're not necessarily hitting that ideal total daily amount, we're still getting kind of frequent surges of kind of like amino acids going in versus like doing our best to get this bolus amount in the morning, then nothing for the rest
And
of the day,
you're
and
stuffed.
still being below our kind of daily target. So it's like we're mitigating the kind of the risk there.
Also, the types of sources, so things like liquid protein, so like protein shakes could be a good measure.
Yeah, yeah.
With GLP-1s, and I'm going to speak just out of experience, and because I've messed with them, because one of the things I want to do is go understand what they're experiencing. And I've just had I was fortunate enough to work with a doctor who was willing to prescribe it to me and go, all right, let's see how this works. And one of the things is, if we're going through a fat loss phase, you had mentioned somebody who's extremely overweight. Great, that's cool. Let's just focus on protein, because we know that their dosing is going to be titrated, moving up on a weekly or every 2 weeks. They're going to bring them up to a max dosing. But we have to understand, what are they dealing with? Even if they're drinking a protein shake, sometimes they're going to feel nauseated. This is where we go, well, maybe even reduce your amount, because now there's individuals who are taking the GLP-1s with no coaching, no guidance. Just take this and move on, right?
That's almost like the only pathway they're using from fat loss perspective is just the appetite
Just the
suppressant.
appetite suppressant. So we know it's going to slow down their gastric emptying, but they're also with this GLP-1, such as semaglutide, they're going to feel nauseous. One of the side effects is feeling nauseous when you're eating, and it kills the food noise, the craving insight. So as coaches, we have to understand, okay, you're dealing with this. What can you consume? And you said it well, Ben. Can we break up the protein intake in small doses across the day? One of the things I like to do is, like, I'm not even worried about your caloric intake. I already know you're going to be in a initial deficit.
Yep.
It's just ideally, I just want you to measure your protein intake. Let's see what you can do. Let's see how we can manipulate that. And Ryan, you said it well. It's like resistance training is key to maintaining muscle if we're in a fat loss phase. And you're gonna lose some muscle when we're in a deficit. It's just the goal is, can we minimize that? Now, when we're going into a recovery period out of the diet, and they're still on GLP-1s, there's a maintenance dose, a very low dose of a GLP-1 that they can stay on, especially when we're dealing with individuals who are pre-diabetic who still need it, that are taking that in place of a metformin that's harder on their liver. So they're taking low dose GLP-1, great, and it's a maintenance dose. And with this low dose, we can even add more food that they need gradually. One of the biggest mistakes is, like, if you are taking it, make sure you're being coached. Make sure you're measuring your protein intake. Make sure you're still getting your steps. Make sure you're drinking plenty of fluids. Make sure you're doing resistance training. That's going to help maintain muscle. And in some cases, you can still gain muscle. There actually has tirzepatide is like the second level of a GLP-1. So you have semaglutide, it's got one antagonist, and then tirzepatide deals with a second hormone, GIP. I'm not a scientist. I don't know the terminology, but it's got a second antagonist. The biggest thing is it reduces the side effects, the nausea and the lack of appetite. It actually brings it down. This is why they lean towards that quite a bit. A lot of doctors do. And now they're working on a third one that even works better. And they're even working on a fourth one that regulates, that works with IGF-1, insulin levels. So it's getting better, but you have to understand protein intake, how to manipulate it, how to kind of measure it. Also, because they're not going to be hungry. They have to understand they have to hit these numbers because they're not going to feel hungry. And when I was on it, I was like, I had to work at making sure I hit my protein intake. I had to consciously know it's time to eat protein again. And I had to consciously make sure I go and do resistance training and drink fluids, because it almost kills your thirst too. So that's the other thing I had to measure on the GLP-1. So it can be done. And if you have to have your dosing reduced, then that's something that you can also have them do. It's like, okay, it's killing your appetite too much. You're not even eating enough protein. Can we reduce it? Because you are working with the coach. You don't have to take the prescribed dosing mechanisms where they increase it as much, you know? And that's, if you're on a GLP-1, tell the doctor who you're working with the coach, and they're helping you regulate your caloric and protein intake as well.
You almost want the minimum dose to do the job.
Yes.
Yeah, because again, if you're utilizing the other pathways of fat loss, well, then you're likely not going to need to hammer that pathway very much. It's like, I don't need to use such a high dose of GLP-1 because, you know, I'm monitoring my calorie intake pretty good. I'm increasing my NEAT. I'm resistance training. My protein intake is up. So now it's like the dosage of GLP-1 isn't going to be as necessary for someone who's not utilizing those pathways at all.
And we talked about this yesterday at dinner. It was mentioned. You did a great job at telling, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And there was a client, he says, well, I can manage hunger. I can deal with it. Well, then you really don't need to mess with the GLP-1. If you can manage that, great. you don't need that tool.
It's not a fat mobilizer. The only reason you drop body fat faster is because your calorie deficit is larger.
Yeah.
Yes.
It just allows you to essentially diet harder with again some side effects, but the main side effect of hunger. But obviously there's other drugs which mobilize, like beta-2 agonists like clenbuterol and things will legit, like you will burn more body fat taking them, but that's not what a GLP-1 does. Exactly like you said, like if hunger's not the problem, but like the rate of fat loss is, then it's like, well, let's look at your calorie deficit. What's your step count? How can we maximize the deficit if you can tolerate more? Last thing we need is a GLP-1.
If we can avoid it, then great, let's avoid it. Let's not mess with it, because we can go several other routes. If you're willing to do that and you can manage it, great. But if you can't, and you've always struggled with food cravings, the food noise, you've always struggled with hunger when you tried to diet before, okay, it's something absolutely that could benefit you.
I've almost look at it like antidepressants. Like they sometimes we know that like long term, if you're depressed, like therapy and kind of solving the issues is the route to go down. Antidepressants can mask it and allow you to kind of be functional, but they don't get to the root cause. However, if you're not in a position to even be able to start therapy, antidepressants are used in conjunction to allow you to be responsive to therapy, and then you wean off the antidepressants and then you're doing therapy. It's almost the same where, because I used to be of the opinion of like, we exhaust all other options, and then if we need to use it, then we will. But it can work from the start whilst you're working alongside, because if someone's food cravings are so bad and you're saying like, yeah, we can do these distractions, we can talk about why we have these cravings, all this stuff, it's great to use in the meantime just to, like you said, just quieten the noise so they can actually listen to you and be like, like I can start working on this stuff whilst my appetite is low and I haven't got these cravings. So then when we start to wean off, I have all these skills to kind of use. Yeah. But it's the celebrities and things that are throwing it in, not addressing behaviors, not addressing habits. Then they pull it, they rebound, and they go, semaglutide is the worst thing ever. GLP-1s are the death of everything. And it's like, well, you used it like a fucking idiot. That's why.
Yeah, it was just a temporary
Band-Aid.
Band-Aid, just
you
a temporary
Band-Aid
fix. And what's missing is these individuals who do take the GLP-1, who just do that and aren't coached and aren't guided correctly. They're still eating the same stuff that's causing them to put on the weight. They're just eating less of it. Yep. So they're not fixing any of the habits that put them in that situation to begin with, because at some point the doctor's going to pull you off of it because you've lost all that weight. And guess what happens? You're back to eating more of the same stuff you have been eating. And this is where the weight starts coming right back off.
Depends what doctor you got. If he likes that cashola, he might keep you on it.
Keep you on it,
You'll double a dose.
But it would be interesting to see the if there would be, or if there is going to be, any research on GLP-1 use alongside behavior change. Because they say like, like the average weight loss on GLP-1 is like 20% of body weight or whatever, and then it plateaus off. But then it's like, okay, well, what about if you use a GLP-1 alongside behavior change, like a fitness program, like what, and then seeing what the net loss would be then, that likely going to go up, and then the sustained is the same. But yeah, in terms of, to answer the question, in terms of maximizing muscle retention, if you need to control the deficit, and if part of that means controlling dose, fair enough. Maintaining the higher protein intake, again, you can go off the protein ratio, but again, depending on how big the person is, that will fluctuate. And then resistance training, minimum 2-3 times a week, and then more if necessary.
Perfect.
2, what adjustments would you make to your training when experiencing age-related joint breakdown?
Deca Durabolin.
Oh, my God.
No. I mean, we spoke about this kind of when we were talking about how to, should you train like an athlete? I would really just start incorporating more joint-friendly movements. It's really that simple. It's like I stop doing shit that hurts and do more of stuff that doesn't hurt. If there is an underlying injury, like tennis elbow or tendonitis or something, I would try and look at how has that come about? Is it that I'm doing too much of a certain movement? Is it that something is immobile and I'm compensating somewhere else? If it's just, like I've got to that age where bench press is always going to hurt my shoulders, I don't really care about bench press anymore. Sack it off and do something else.
Hey, we're like that now. We're only 33.
Yeah.
Except for me, I guess. No, I'm 20. I'm 23.
23. Yeah.
You would have had a tough paper round growing up.
I'm out of age. Only because I've experienced this personally. At 47, no matter how healthy I try to keep myself, there's things that are going to be affected because of age for myself.
100%. We can solve that problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've lifted all my life. I've always worked out. Back squatting for me is like one of those things. It hurts, and the risk of injury for me is too high. So I go to joint friendly movements, and this is what I prescribe. It's like all the movements work, and we've talked about it's just how you approach the intensifiers with that workout or that rep scheme or set scheme that can change the way that you elicit muscular growth or muscle retention. It's do the movements that do not cause pain that still elicit the same effect. It's pretty simple. Man, it always hurts when I back squat. Well, stop back squatting. You know, it always hurts when I deadlift. Well, let's not deadlift. Let's do other things. And this is, again, as if you have a great coach, communicate that. And it's like, you know, I love back squatting, but I know I can't back squat. I'm not going to. I'll go leg extensions. I'll go leg press. And I deal with tennis elbow. Guess what? When it's flared up, I want to avoid picking plates up and picking dumbbells up as much as possible. I'm going to go to pin-loaded machines when I need to until my elbows are no longer inflamed and I can go back to traditional lifting.
Yeah. It's like,
Go on, you go ahead.
it's like looking at the reason why you're doing the exercise. So I'm doing back squats to work my legs. It's like, but back squats hurt. Okay, so what other ways can we stimulate your leg muscles that don't actually hurt your knees? And like I do that myself, so I don't squat anymore, but like I'll do like a Bulgarian single leg dumbbell split squat, which don't hurt my knees. The weight is far less. I'll hold on to something for stability, and I can still work my legs. You know. So
the only other thing I would say is like if someone is having joint issues, things, I would say like, are you doing any mobility warm ups? And if they go no, it's like, well, there's your first kind of step
potentially.
And then if you're willing to do that stuff and you're still having issues with that movement, then we'd say, well, let's just sub it out and do something else.
Yeah.
that's us, isn't it? We don't do any mobility or stretching.
Yeah. Well, I started now, but it's because I'm not willing to let go of deadlifts.
I always heard, you know, mobility for adults is like getting a young kid to eat their vegetables.
Yeah.
It's just like, I've got to go mobilize for 10 minutes before I can do anything.
100%.
Great Bulgarian split squat. Can't even touch my toes.
Yeah.
Another option then is, well, another avenue to go to then is from a cardio standpoint as well, running. So obviously you can switch if you're looking to get more aerobic work in. There's higher impact forms of cardio like running. Then you've got like I was saying to Ryan the other day, incline walk is like a godsend. Jump on a treadmill for an incline walk because it's like, you know, the movement pattern is very similar to running, but then you can get a heart rate similar to running. Yet the impact on the ankles, on the knees, on the hips, much more friendly. But also the legs, again, you're looking at strength within reason here. But it's like, you can build some solid calves, like a high incline hike like that. You build some good strong calves. Your thighs and stuff are getting worked. And then, or you can go for like a cycle, you can go for a swim.
Swimming.
Swimming is almost like the lowest impact.
Yeah, it is. I've got a client who's dealing with hip issues who possibly needs a hip replacement. And with lower back issues, hard for him to get the steps in, hard for him to jump on a bike, hard for him to do it. Started swimming. Same results as if he was doing 10,000 steps a day. Same results. And he's like,
just more wet.
Especially if you're a bad swimmer, like you're going to burn a shit ton of calories.
So inefficient.
Yeah.
Which I am. So awesome. Question 3. How important are rest periods?
So we have prescribed rest periods in our programs for clients. Personally, unless I'm doing a Metcon, an AMRAP, I think it was Charles Staley who did escalated density training like EDT. You'd have like a time cap on like certain movements. Outside of that, I have never timed my rest periods in my training career. Never.
No. Same. I'll say to my clients, I'll be like, rest until you feel like you can train the next set at the same intensity, but I'll give like a broad range, like 90 to 3 minutes, because like you could be there an hour. I don't feel ready yet.
And that's what I mean. So they are important. It's not you don't monitor them because they're not important. There's
no specific.
Yeah, there's specific. Like the general gist is like strength. They might say like 3 to 5. Hypertrophy. They might say 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Muscular endurance. They may say 60 seconds or 30 seconds. So they do throw out these general ones, which again it holds some legs.
Yeah,
but the one that I always go back to is rest as long as needed in order for you to perform to the best of your ability within the next working
session. And there is some research as well where like I think there's some studies that come out where like 3 minutes rest is more productive because the output's higher on the quality of the sets.
you
is higher.
accumulate better quality
You're
work all the
basically
time.
going to be restricted by what's the amount of work that you need to accomplish in the time frame that you have available at the gym. And then it's, if you can afford to rest a little bit longer between the sets, if your goal is, to build strength and hypertrophy, obviously, like you said, if your goal is endurance, one of the kind of traits of that is to be able to recover faster or go longer. One of the key ways you do that is, if you're doing like intervals on a treadmill, the way you might progress it is we're going to do the same intensity, but now we're going to shorten the rest periods by 10 seconds and we have less time to recover. But, unless I'm doing like a rest pause set or something, and even then I'm counting in breaths, there's no I'm not timing anything in the gym personally.
I
I've seen
bet
you with a
because
stopwatch or
and a whistle, tell myself to go.
I bet because of your experience, so I bet if you did actually time it, it would fall within that ballpark.
It'd probably be very, very it'll be very consistent between certain
And
moves.
that's
it's been
what
30
I
minutes
was
since
gonna
my last
say.
set.
I was actually going to say that. It's like we can do that without timing it because we've done it for so long, right? But if you're a beginner, pay attention to the time and then just start regulating it without paying attention to the time and how you're feeling, how fast you're recovering. And agreeing with you, Ben, it's like, if it's strength work, the more rest, the better.
Yep.
So you can hit the next set just as refreshed. But if any other thing, if it's the endurance work or high intensity work, you want the shorter rest time because you're trying to improve your recovery.
And there's a sweet spot as well. I mean, two situations. One, did my first powerlifting competition, and I didn't realize how long it was between your attempts. And so I'm used to training, resting 3, maybe 4 minutes between top sets of squats. You got about 15 minutes between attempts. I had to go back and do another rep just to keep warm. And then even like the other week, there was a guy talking to me in the gym, and he spoke to me for too long. And I was like, I don't even want to get under the bar now. I feel like my nervous system's kind of cooled up. I need to warm up again. And so there is going to be like a sweet spot for those heavier lifts where like too long isn't necessarily good. And if you're doing bicep curls and things, the thing I find with clients is they either rest way too long or nowhere near enough. Like they're doing like 10 seconds, got to go to work, and it's like you're getting nothing
They're
from
not
those
lifting
second
any
sets.
poundage just because the rest period is just too low.
Or if someone's just sat on their phone and then they start watching a video or something or a reel, and it's like you've been on your phone now for 5 minutes.
Start watching a Netflix series.
They see the word intensity, and they're not thinking like, intensity by increasing the load or increasing the amount of work you're doing within a set. They think of it as like, if I just do barely any rest and just zip round with this workout,
sweating
it's
and stuff.
intense because I'm breathing heavy. But it's like, well, these are aerobic benefits that you're seeing from strength training, which is a strange adaptation going down that route. Yeah. I think, if you are a complete novice, it can help because again, that's where they don't really know. So just having a rough idea and just keeping an eye on the clock, but then you start to build. I know when I'm recovered and I know when I'm not. Like I can sit there and be like, "Are you ready for your next set?" And you're like, "Nah."
The other thing as well is that because people will say, how long should you rest? And I'll say, well, how fit are you? Because if you're really unfit, you might need 5 minutes between sets. If you've got a really good aerobic background, you might need less. Like I've trained guys in person where they're like, next set, and I'm like, you're not ready yet. Like I can see you're breathing too heavy before this next set. The quality is going to be dog shit. And so I'll be like, no, not yet. Like wait, take another deep breath. So even doing the rest pause sets the other day with clients, someone would lay back and I'm like, we got another 10 seconds yet. Like otherwise you're going to get one rep and just bomb. So it's going to depend on your experience level as well. But I would say if in doubt, rest a little bit longer. It's not going to ruin
If anything,
anything.
wait till your breathing just calms down a little bit. If anything, at least use that as a measure. If you're not using anything else, all right, cool. I'm back under the bar or back on the machine. And the other variable that's that they can start considering is if didn't take me that long to recover, did I even do the work I needed to do in the previous set?
Yes.
Did I go too light?
That's where a fair few people can go wrong is, I only needed 20 seconds.
You didn't go hard enough.
You didn't go
that
hard
working
enough.
set was poor.
And going hard enough it's almost relevant. And it was funny when I used to run a CrossFit gym, I would have clients that would do a hard Metcon, but then it was like, I'm gonna go bench press and back squat in the back. I'm like, then you really didn't go as hard as you should have.
Because
Or
if you go
those
hard
days expected.
Metcon, you ain't looking forward to
You're
back
not
squatting
done.
after.
Even because I trained in a group of 4 yesterday morning, and we needed it got round to you again, and you're like, fucking hell, me again. And there's 3 other dudes doing their sets, so you're looking at minimum 90 seconds after you've kind of changed the weights and stuff. And even then, I was I'm blowing out my ass because we were taking everything to failure and actually going hard in the sets.
Just chasing it.
Yeah, we were cranking. It was good.
Yeah, they were good sessions. Right, we've got question 4. If I go on TRT, will I need to be on it for the rest of my life? Again, this was a topic that we were sort of getting into last night, wasn't it?
So, I mean, the answer is you don't need to do anything if you don't want to. Like, are there going to be...
Apart from pay your taxes.
Yeah. But you don't have to. Just prison time's there if you need
There's
it.
the consequences.
Yeah. But exactly that. You don't need to, but there are consequences if you're on it and then you come off it. And so I have the conversation with clients that I say, normally if you're on, you're going to be on. And so I would always... One of the first questions I would ask is, like, financially, can you afford it? Are you practically willing to do it for a long period of time? Like, because most of the time you are injecting yourself multiple times a week. Is that something that you're okay with doing? Or are you going to do it twice and be like, I don't like this? Yeah. And then we're going to have fucked up your hormone levels only to come off and have to sort them out again. But then the other one is I would always ask, have you had your kids?
Yeah.
You know, and so if fertility is a concern, then I would say, we'll hold off. Because, you know, there's loads of stuff that you can do now with, you know, and be on TNT and, you know, have a successful pregnancy, but you're probably more likely to be able to do it without it. Yeah. But I tend to say if you're on, you're on. But that's not to say you have to be. You know, if I have a client and they say, you know what, I just want to come off, I'd be like, okay, cool. But like, we need to monitor your blood work. And I mean, you firsthand experienced this where like shit didn't come back and, or it came back, but nowhere near where it was. And so it's like, then you make the informed decision. Am I okay with this? Or do I want to go back on?
I think it's one of those topics, like, because they generally say like it's a lifetime therapy, but that is on the basis of the symptoms that you should be having in order for you to go on. Those symptoms will return when you come off.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if your plan is to solve the symptoms, you are going to need to be on it forever. Similar, again, if you only use a GLP-1 as a tool to manage your weight loss, well, then it's likely that you're just going to need to use the GLP-1 forever because you're not addressing anything else. However, you can also... Again, you won't die if you come off it. Like there's loads and loads and loads of guys who do go on TRT, but then they go, oh, well, the symptoms that I've now accumulated through being on TRT are worse than the ones that I had when I wasn't on it in the first place. Yeah. So I'm just going to come off it and deal with the old symptoms. So you don't have to be on it forever. It's a therapy that if you are going to continue to have the benefits of the therapy, you are going to need to stay on it. Because if you come off the therapy, then the benefits of the therapy
it's not a short-term therapy, basically.
Yes.
So
It doesn't fix your testosterone levels.
Yeah.
As in, like, so then you can come off and then they're still fixed.
Yeah, if anything, it will your natural levels will likely never recover to where they were. Even if they were already low, they're probably going to be even lower when you decide to come off and try and sort it.
Again, there's so many nuances because, like, well, how long have you been on for?
Yeah.
Like, some guy was asking me, he's like, I've been on 3 months. And I was like, just come off.
Yeah.
Like, if you've been on 3 months, like, mate, that's not going to make much of a difference. But if you've been on for like 10 years, then yeah, the chance of recovery is going to be way slimmer. Yeah. And then it's like, have you been using HCG? Because, like, I was speaking to, so one of my guys was using, his levels came in at something like 280 nanogram per deciliter. But he was also like 220 pounds. He then went on TRT with HCG as well, so his own production would have still been live. He lost, he went down to like 160, so say he lost like 50, 60 pounds. He then had to come off TRT for X, Y, and Z reasons, retested his testosterone, they were at 580. So now it's like, so he didn't really shut his nutsack off because he was using the HCG alongside, so his recovery was much better, and now he's lost that weight, which was probably impacting his ability to produce anyway. Now he's even better than he was. So there's so many, it's never like a black or white. If you're on, that's almost like, oh, you take one injection and that's it now. Yeah. You're down the rabbit hole. Yeah. But it's like, it's one of those things that it's a therapy that is meant to be there long term.
I'm on the camp where understand that once you're on, these are the things you're willing to give up. Kids, right? Are you done having children? If you're predisposed to hair loss, it's going to happen sooner. Just be aware that these are the things that are going to be happening when you're on it. I'm on the campus like, but once you're on it, just plan on being on it. Now, what's going to help with, if it's somebody who's very overweight and we get them down, yes, it's going to change their levels and it's going to change how they respond to TRT. This is where communication with your doctor, just like with your coach, is going to be important. They're going to monitor your dosing. It may change your dosing. You may not need as much, you know, if that happens. And this is where it's important to, one, follow the blood work. Once you're on it, that's going to be very important because it may change your dosing as your body fat percentage changes, as you gain more lean muscle along the way if you're being coached correctly and guided through the process correctly.
It's setting clear expectations, isn't it? Making sure the client knows the pros and cons. And like if they're prepared for the worst case scenario, then anything else is a bonus.
That's it. It's when you start, are you willing to be on forever?
Yeah.
It's not something that you might have to do. Like again, loads of people do come off, but you might put yourself in a position where you do need it even more than you do now. So it's like you have to be willing to be on it forever. However, there is an opportunity to come off as well. It's not like you have to.
I even look at like their habits and stuff as well. It's like if you're someone that like forgets to brush your teeth in the morning, how consistent are you going to be with your injections? Where there are consequences if you miss them and your hormone levels are going up and down. You might get skin breakouts, like mood swings. Sex drive is going to go up and down. You know, if you're a very inconsistent person, it's like any medication. You know, there is a regimen that you will follow, like recommended by your doctor. If you're not willing to follow instruction, probably not for you either. And so there's loads of like nuances to, you know, some guys, you know, they drop a fucking syringe and be like, oh, I'll be all right. And it's like, well, you obviously don't understand like kind of infections and things. And so like
just dust that off.
Yeah, like little things like that. It's like probably not for you. But yeah, do you need to be on it forever? No.
Yeah, I think we covered that one. Clear the air on that one. This is question 5. So I have a previous history. This is good, actually. I have a previous history of weight regain. How would you approach sustainable fat loss? So you've got someone who's come to now, they just yo in, boom, boom, up and down. They can lose 50 pounds, but they gain 55.
I would get like I would collect as much information as possible about all of their experiences with the weight loss and regain. How did they lose the weight? What was the turning point where they started to regain the weight? What was their lifestyle like at the time? What was their emotional situation at the time? Basically just get like an inventory of like everything they've done to that point. So I can try and get an idea of, you know, is it an emotional thing? Is it a self-sabotage thing? Is it a change of lifestyle thing? Is it a, I deserve this because I've done this thing? And then I would kind of map out the plan from there. Usually it's going to be a slower approach, I think, and like whilst we kind of address those underlying kind of like issues, if there are those issues, I definitely don't like fat loss sprints for someone that's prone to yo-yo because it can almost feed into it and it almost turns into like an eating disorder. Or not. I don't like the term eating disorder because like eating disorders are clinically diagnosed as like an eating disorder, but like disordered eating or more disordered eating. So and that's with anything, and you can even look at that on like a micro level. Like for someone like that, I'm not going to do low calorie days and high calorie days because it's that starve binge cycle. So the first thing I'm going to look at doing is consistency. And then when I do that, I'm going to make minor adjustments and just get a very, very steady downward slope that's sustainable and as painless as possible for them. And then I'm probably going to put in some diet breaks, maybe earlier than what they're used to, because I'm going to quit while we're ahead so we don't experience those like diet fatigue symptoms.
So like a proactive
Be
programming.
proactive and not reactive, and probably set the expectation from the start. It's going to be a slower approach, but then we're not going to get that kind of that yo-yo outcome.
And I love what you said there as well. Like what you often find is with people who yo-yo diet is that they're great at losing weight, but they can't maintain it. So it's like what they're doing for that time to lose X amount of weight, they can't do to maintain it. So it's like, okay, they're short-term solutions, but they're not going to carry you over to maintain that weight long-term. So one of the things I'll always say is that we're doing this strategy to lose the weight. I'm going to make sure we have an exit strategy to maintain it. Otherwise, you have the client, they're like, oh, well, I'm doing this diet. I can't sustain that for the rest of my life. Without any exit strategy, they just regain all the weight back. So it's like making sure they have an exit strategy on their maintenance plan, not their fat loss plan.
Yeah, and I like with both of you, I covered a lot of it. It's any diet will work, but a lot of these diets that are out there and marketed, they'll teach you how to lose the weight, and you can lose the weight. But how many of them actually talk about, well, now let's show you how to maintain the weight off? They really don't, because a lot of it's marketed to where we want you to come back and continue using this. We want you to come back.
75 hard. It's like, we get these epic results, then you fuck off for 30 days, then you have to do it again.
That's the beauty of what we do as coaches, and we care about how we do it, especially with Supra Human. It's like we have the exit strategy. This is what changes. You've never been taught how to pull yourself out of this diet phase. And then talking about the history, Ben, I want to understand what diets you have tried. What was it about those that were not sustainable for you? Well, because I know we're not going to do any style similar to the ones that you just hated because you were miserable for that short period of time. They don't work. They're not sustainable for you. So let's find what is sustainable, and it may be even slower, but it's sustainable, and you're going to be able to pull out of that and maintain the weight off.
I love what Ben said as well about like a consistent, slower approach, because it often makes the exit strategy that much easier, because often people will lose the weight in a much more aggressive way than what they actually need to and what they're actually not capable of doing, which then they rebound much harder. Whereas if you've got like a more sustainable fat loss approach, which still gets the result, they're not like I often see people who yo-yo diet, even halfway through the diet, they're already thinking about going back to their old eating behaviors.
I got a list of foods that I'm going to eat.
Yeah,
when I finish this
exactly,
diet.
The
right?
reward is like, now I can go have this. No, that's the shit that got you fat to begin with.
Yeah, so it's almost like the exit strategy doesn't even matter then. So they've already decided they're going to go back to what they did previously. Whereas if you do it a lot more slower, they don't feel those urges as much. And it's like, okay, now this is the plan going out.
And I can, out of personal experience, like being in the CrossFit world and going in, I've done paleo, I've done the keto, I've done all of that. None of it worked. It's like I regained my weight. I knew what I needed to do. And when I was working with you, Ben, it was like we got photo shoot ready. And then after that, life happens and I had to, stop being coached. And I had no exit strategy. I just really didn't have the guidance. I knew what needed to happen. I just didn't have the coaching or the accountability. Gained 30 pounds again. And it's like this exit strategy now is just like, it was a lot more tapered, I was like, it matters. Even though I knew what to do, I was also guided in the process, and like I was able to keep the weight off.
You mentioned this, right? Is like you will incorporate the exit strategy within the fat loss plan as the initial expectation. So if you're like, we're going to be in a 20-week diet, maybe you're only in a deficit, or like you're going to hit the peak of the deficit at like week 12. And then the last 8 weeks, just slowly climbing out. So in their head, they're like, oh, I've finished at 20 weeks. Be like, yeah, and we're back at maintenance. Like we've already kind of factored that into the plan, as opposed to like, we're going to diet for 12 weeks and then we're going to do this thing. It just like, it's almost like a mind trick where they're still dialed in and mentally focused, and you're helping them come out whilst they're still being dialed in. So there's less kind of fallout on the back end.
Yeah. Because I always tell them, that's not our end point. When we get to leaning you out, that's just the beginning, because the most important and crucial part is getting you to maintain that weight off and keeping it off.
Yeah.
I think it's tough because people, they often will use a short-term dietary tactic to solve a long-term problem. And when you look at like the people who can sustain weight loss in the long run, it can be a little bit more like generic. It's like, people who have a higher fluid intake, people who have a higher fruit and veg intake, people who are more physically active. It's quite hard to sort of pigeonhole that stuff. Whereas like for short-term weight loss tactics, just say, you can cut this out, you can track to these numbers, you can do, and so they're not always the best to solve the long-term problem. So sometimes even for these people, it's like, well, we're not even going to try and lose weight right at the start. We're going to develop a set of foundational health behaviors or dietary behaviors that are going to support your ability to execute this in the long run. Once you've mastered those, then you start making those tweaks, and it's all a lot more straight flow. But that's going to be harder to get someone to do, because they're likely going to want to make progress right out the block. And they don't want to make behavioral progress. They want to make physical progress. But for some of those people, it's like you might just want to spend the next 3 months just refining your standard eating behaviors and not even worrying about, like, if it happens as a byproduct, which it might do, fine. But once you've because for a lot of people, if they just increase their fruit and veg intake, they increase their fluid intake, they increase their steps, they decrease the amount of times they eat out, they're likely going to lose a good chunk of weight anyway. Yeah. But then it's like, now we're going to worry about things like calorie tracking. Now we're going to manage things like weighing our foods out. Now, because then all that stuff then will fall into play. And then if you remove that stuff, they're not going to resort back to the old diet in the first place. But it's like, you've got to almost sort those more vague lifestyle habits first. Otherwise, you're just going to go back to what you were doing prior. And again, it's
the big rocks we talk about. Let's get the big rocks in the jar first.
Yeah.
Get them set in, because everything else will fit in place really well.
That's like when someone goes on a vacation, and it's like, if you just stick to good foundations, like if you eat a lean protein with every meal, you have some sort of fruit and vegetables with every meal, you have 500 ml of water with every meal, and you walk a little bit through the day, like over a week period, like how wrong can it go? So, oh my God, I gained 20 pounds. Like it just doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah.
Or if you go and have 3 pastries and
Yeah.
2
Couple of cakes.
yeah, the foundation's this trying to be poor.
Yeah. Hey, another key one as well, like, and I know you always say this, Ben, as well, is like create an environment where it's as easy as possible to do those things you spoke about, and as difficult as possible not to, you know? And on this trip, we haven't done that.
Yeah, the environment's been terrible and the excuse has been
you guys
worse.
are
Exactly,
messing me
right?
up. I'm on maintenance. You guys are screwed with.
But you know, guys, if you do have any questions or topics that you want us to cover on these roundtables, throw them in the comments. If you want to talk shit about our hairlines or our fashion sense, do that as well.
Not my airline.
Yeah, I know.
No, we've got Lego hairline over there. But
Is it going forwards?
But be sure to throw your questions in and we can attack it on the next roundtable. But thank you as always for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And we'll see you next time.
If you love this show, please like, share, and leave us a 5-star review so that we can help more people. I'm John Matson, Supra Human CEO, reminding you to always go get what's yours.